Welcome to Modern Learning on the Air. I'm your host, David Kelly, and today we're going to talk about a challenge that resonates with a lot of learning professionals executives who are no longer satisfied with completion rates or attendance reports. They want to know what actually changed and why it mattered to the business. In today's episode, Kevin M. Yates joins us to explore how learning leaders can connect training programs to real business outcomes. We'll discuss why engagement alone isn't enough, how inconsistent delivery undermines trust, and what it takes to build evidence that leaders believe in. If your organization is asking tougher questions about learning impact, this conversation will help you answer them with confidence. Kevin, thanks so much for joining us here today.
It's good to be here, David. I'm excited about this discussion.
I am as well. Now, I'm very familiar with the work that you do, but for those who may not be as familiar with it, tell us a little bit about yourself and the work that you do.
Thanks, David. And so in the global training, learning, and talent development community, I am known as the L&D Detective. And that is a reflection of the kind of work that I do. My work is focused on investigating how training and learning as an experience and L&D as a function is contributing to human performance and business performance. So David, I'm looking for the facts, the clues, the evidence that shows how, in combination with other contributions in the workplace performance ecosystem, how is training, learning, and talent development contributing ultimately to business goals? So I've been doing that work now for, gosh, just a little over 30 years. That is what I am narrowly focused on. It's the work that I love. It's the work that I do. Um, Doing it all over the world, literally, globally, and I think it's important. So it is the niche where I have found a great deal of success and a great deal of joy, if it makes sense to say that. I enjoy this work, David. And so that's who I am and that's what I do.
And I appreciate the energy and the passion that you have for this, which is why I'm so happy to have you here as a guest. Now, I want to start our conversation talking about the gap that exists around learning measurement, why learning leaders struggle and why learning departments struggle to prove their value. And you spend a lot of time helping organizations connect their efforts around learning to the results that they have. Why do you think this gap between learning activity and business impact still exists?
I think, David, just to be very transparent and honest with you, I think that we are weighed down by legacy, by habit, and by practices that used to work, but no longer work in 2026 and going forward. So I think that with that being our legacy, the way that we are accustomed to measuring impact, like we measure things like attendance, we measure sentiment through surveys, and we're in the habit of calling it an impact, but it's really not. So I think that we struggle, David, because we're calling something something that is not what it is. And I think that when we are able to change our mindset and our practices, and when we connect with the truth, we'll be able to stop the struggle and start to chase after things that we really can measure, particularly as it relates to how we can take a look at what training, learning, and talent development contribute to the workplace performance ecosystem, and how that then, in combination with other contributions, ultimately lead to a way in which we can investigate, evaluate, and measure how training, learning, and talent development is effectively contributing to business goals. So I think that when we release some of these ideas that we have about what measurement is, we then create so much more opportunity to be successful at measurement. I'm looking forward to the day where that is no longer a question, David. I'm looking forward to the day where we put down these legacy habits, these legacy mindsets, and pick up the truth and pick up practices that actually work when it comes to measuring how training, learning, and talent development is contributing to performance.
Legacy is, I agree, is such an anchor to a lot of this conversation. It helps us, that keeps us from moving forward. Are there other things that organizations are doing that have them relying so much on completion rates and satisfaction scores as the only measurements they talk about? Are there other hurdles that they have beyond just legacy?
So I think that there are two hurdles. I think that the first hurdle is what I just talked about. And that hurdle is what we believe impact is or what we believe measurement is. So that's the first hurdle. So it's almost like we are doing detriment to ourselves. I also think, David, the other opportunity and where there is a hurdle is what a lot of organizations and businesses believe impact is. So, our business partners and our stakeholders have grown accustomed to us giving them completion rates and survey data and calling it impact. And so, a lot of organizations and businesses are not aware of what the possibilities are because they only know what they have been given. And so when we can get past our own thinking and when we can shift the thinking of our business partners and stakeholders by showing them something different, I think that that will then be the point at which we can be much more successful with measuring how training and learning is contributing to performance.
When we think about measurement, even in the conversation we're having today, there's going to be a lot of focus on the metrics and the type of things that we are telling our story through. And I want to step back from that for just a second because there's the way we're telling our story, there's the metrics, but there's also the gap that exists between our efforts and the actual impact that it has in terms of what happened, what's different when people leave. Where do you most often see the gap between where the learning and the performance breaks down from learning between the classroom or the e-learning course that someone's doing and the real performance that they have after the fact?
That's a great question. And I want to lead this part of the discussion, David, by focusing on the idea that not only is training, learning, and talent development a viable solution for movement in performance, it is also a viable solution for maintaining performance. I think, David, quite often we get caught up in this idea that we're looking for a change and we're looking for a big change. We're looking for like a big shift so that we can say, wow, training did this or training did that. And undoubtedly, there are times where we need training, learning, and talent development in combination with other contributors that have power and potential to move performance. But there are also times where we need to keep the train on the track. So we also need to be thinking about how can training, learning, and talent development maintain performance. So I want to go back to your question, right? So for me, I think that the gap is when we are not informed about what performance expectations are required in order to either um, change a business goal or maintain a business goal. We don't lead with conversations around performance. We traditionally lead with conversations around training. So it's how much, how often, who do we need to train? Where do we need to train? How many people do we need to train? What do we need to train about? Well, I say let's abandon that conversation and let's have a conversation or discussion that is intentionally and purposefully and narrowly focused on business performance and human performance, which is a very different kind of conversation than when do we need training, how much training do we need, right? So the struggle that we continue to have, in addition to the legacy mindset that we have about it, I think that we need to start having very different kinds of conversations that are led by performance as an outcome versus training as the goal. I think that that's where one of the largest opportunities are, or rather one of the biggest opportunities is just kind of changing the conversations that we're having.
Yeah. We talked earlier about trust that leaders have in the stories that L&D is telling, and I want to. We're going to talk about the how in another segment as we get past and further into discussion. But I want to hop over that for a second. How does the conversation with leaders change when you start talking to them about performance in the way you're describing it? We'll talk about the how and what it looks like, but how does that change your relationship with the leaders in an organization when you start having these conversations?
I love that question, David, because you're talking about a shift in our own mindset about who we are as L&D professionals, right? So you're talking about how does that change and how does that shift? When we're talking to executive leaders or the C-suite or business partners and stakeholders. Here's the change, David. I believe that L&D professionals are performance consultants first and L&D practitioners second. So, as part of this change that we're talking about, it's a change in the view of how we see ourselves. If we see ourselves as performance consultants who offer L&D solutions, to support performance needs in the organization, it then by default kind of shifts the discussion. Because again, if we are viewing ourselves as performance consultants first, performance advisors first, we're then having conversations that are deeply rooted in performance versus conversations that are rooted in transactional conversations about training. So when we see ourselves as performance consultants, we're thinking differently, we are practicing differently, and we're also providing some different types of solutions. So for me, performance is the North Star. So I say, let's think of ourselves as performance consultants and advisors first, and L&D practitioners second, which is not to take away from the value of L&D by making it secondary. I'm just saying, David, that if we lead with a performance first mindset, we are so much more likely to create the types of solutions that businesses and organizations need to support performance goals.
And I love that you position that as a mindset because I agree with you that it's something that's kind of the foundation that you need to start with. Because when you change your mindset, you start seeing things around you differently. You start seeing the work that you do in the environment that work exists in differently. And when you do that, you start seeing that you need other things in place in order to really have learning impact performance in a meaningful way. And that's where I'd like to take our discussion after the break. When we come back from our break, we're going to explore what actually needs to be in place for learning to truly drive real performance. So stick with us after the break.
Virtual training can fail fast. Long pauses, distracted learners, a facilitator who just reads slides. If your audience isn't engaged, they're not learning. And that's a problem. The truth is, content alone isn't enough. Great facilitation makes the difference. But what if you don't have an expert facilitator on your team? No problem. We do. At InSync Training, our professional facilitators don't just run your sessions, they bring them to life. We take the time to understand your company culture, training goals, and audience needs, ensuring a seamless experience where engagement isn't just encouraged, it's guaranteed. From leadership development and onboarding to global learning initiatives, our facilitators create interactive, results-driven training that sticks. And with our deep expertise in virtual and hybrid environments, we handle all the complexities, so you don't have to. Because great training isn't just about what's being taught, it's how it's being delivered. When the right facilitator is leading, training doesn't just work, it delivers real impact. Don't settle for sessions that fall flat. Let's talk today and make your training unforgettable.
Welcome back. Now, for our next segment, we're going to talk about the conditions that are required for impact. We're going to explore what must exist for learning to truly translate into meaningful, measurable outcomes. Now, when learning programs truly move the needle, what tends to be different about them, Kevin?
So I think that it goes back to what we touched on a little bit earlier. What needs to be in place is a way in which we can investigate, discover, and uncover what the real performance requirements are, the real performance needs are for human performance. And in order for that to happen, David, we need to have something in place that empowers us with having the right types of discussions and conversations with training requesters. So that's as far back as we need to go. I mean, we need to go back to the beginning. So, David, what does that look like? Great question. I'm glad you asked. So, when we get those traditional training requests, no matter how they're coming in, to different organizations and different teams, we need to be prepared to respond in such a way that we are asking questions about performance. So the conversation sounds like, what is the business goal? What are the human performance requirements to achieve that business goals? If you were to compare performance is, rather where performance is today to where it needs to be, what does that look like? What are some of the threats to human performance? What is it that prevents people from performing in a way now that helps them be able to either, maintain that business goal or move that business goal? What are some of the key performance indicators that we're using as signals for how people are performing. So if you noticed, David, none of those questions had anything to do with training, but they had everything to do with performance. So before we start thinking about what to design, what to create, we really need to start having some performance based discussions that help us uncover and discover what is it that we can do as L&D to contribute or make a contribution to the workplace performance ecosystem where all these different elements are coming together to help the business achieve a goal. So again, just to kind of circle back to that question, what do we need to do different? We got to have different conversations. Our conversations can no longer start with what kind of training do you need? How many hours do you want the training to be? What do you want us to focus on in the training? No, we got to stop that. That's some of that legacy thinking that I talked about earlier. That's some of that legacy mindset. We got to put performance at the forefront, and everything that we do, everything that we create, everything that we deliver, I believe, should revolve around the expectation that training, learning, and talent development is making a contribution to performance goals and business goals as well. Does that make sense?
It does. I want to dig into it a little further because you
Yeah.
gave some examples of the type of questions we ask today when we're asking for training objectives and the traditional types of questions. How would you flip those questions? Can you give me some examples of the types of questions that we can be asking to get to those more meaningful business metrics?
Yeah. So, again, the first question to ask, so simple, David. What is the business goal? Now, what I have seen that trips people up is when the question is asked, what is the business goal? We sometimes might hear someone say, well, the business goal is to get X number of people trained by X date. That's not a business goal. That's a training goal. And we can talk about that later. But what we want to talk about first is what is it that the business is currently focused on that it wants to achieve, sustain, or maintain? Is it growth? Is it an improvement in quality scores? Is it, getting more market share? Is it reducing customer complaints? Is it getting more customer referrals? Is it reducing costs? Whatever that goal is, that's what we need to be centered on and focused on. So the first question to ask, what is the business goal? What are you trying to achieve? And then a follow-up question to get the context of the business goal is to ask, why is that a business goal? Is it because we're slipping in market share? Is it because we're getting more complaints about the quality of our products? Is it because we are getting more errors, right? And when we know that, the follow-up question then is, well, what are we using to measure the extent to which that business goal is hitting the target or not? That's a key performance indicator. And that is when we get the metric or the measure that will become the North Star, or what I like to call the signal for the extent to which training and learning is measurably contributing to that business goal. So again, David, those are some very different types of questions than the ones that we're used to having. But I believe that minimally, if you ask those three questions that I just talked about, and most importantly, add a fourth one, what are the human performance requirements to either maintain or achieve that business goal? There are or rather, that's the information we need to be more thoughtful, and to be more strategic and to be more performance focused. I have other questions. Actually, a shameless plug here, David, but in the L&D Detective Kit, I have 12 questions. There are 6 questions for business performance and 6 questions for human performance. And getting the answers to those 12 questions then empowers you to make informed decisions and recommendations for when training and development is the right solution, and David, when it's not the right solution. So again, it's all about changing that conversation, man. You got to be thinking differently about who we are, what we do, and what the goal is.
And for anyone who wants to check out more details on those list of questions that Kevin was talking about, we'll be sure to include that in the show notes. And what I loved about what you were describing there is these questions are asked early on. We have an understanding of what these business metrics are, what the business outcomes are, and then we have a clear design intent. We design with those business outcomes in mind, which is so critical for our success. And I love that you've positioned that early. So we have the strategy, we get those questions down, we understand the business strategy, we design with those business strategies in mind. Then we have to deliver the program. How much does consistency in delivery affect whether or not learning translates to the performance?
So, when we talk about consistency, what I think about, David, is the extent to which we are consistent with our design strategy and our design methodology. And so, my experience tells me, and where I have seen success, is when there is consistency with a performance based design strategy. When we are thinking about performance as an outcome, when we're thinking about performance as a result, and we approach design consistently that way, that then increases the likelihood that we're going to be successful in our contribution to the workplace performance ecosystem. So we can't be thinking about performance sometimes and not be thinking about performance at other times. So for me, the thing that's important about consistency is to always have a performance first mindset. When I think about it, David, I just think that that's why we do what we do. I think that that's why we're engaged in the work that we do as training, learning, and talent development professionals. I think that we're in the work of, or in the business of helping people be the best that they can be. And we want them to be the best that they can be with the ways in which they are performing in their work and in their jobs. We want people to be able to perform optimally, right? We want to maximize their ability to perform in ways that help them either move the needle or sustain the needle. So for me, when I think about consistency, I say, David, we have to just be consistently thinking about performance as an outcome. Again, not sometimes thinking about performance as an outcome and sometimes not. I just think it's the North Star, and we got to lead with that each and every time.
So there's a process here. There's ways that we can do this. It almost sounds, dare I use the word, easy to do what we're describing, because it doesn't sound overly complicated as a process. And yet most organizations, I'd argue, still struggle with something like this. Why do so many organizations struggle to gather credible evidence after their programs are done?
Yeah, so I think that there are two guilty parties for the struggle. And I say that lovingly. I think that the first challenge around this, again, it kind of goes back to us. And by us, I mean training, learning, and talent development professionals, particularly those who have been around for a long time because of what we're used to, because of the mindset that we've had historically, because of the kinds of discussions and topics that we're used to having. So, as well as I do, David, here's how it has sounded historically, right? Someone comes to us and says, I'd like one virtual training, two e learnings, and a side order of live instructor led. Oh, and make that to go. So we then get the order, we go off and we make whatever that is, we put it on a tray, and then we pass it over the counter and give that requester what she or he asked for, right? So we're used to that. And guess who else is used to it, David? Our business partners and our stakeholders and people who work with us. They're used to us serving and working in that capacity and in that role. It's like we're a fulfillment center. And because that fulfillment center relationship is so deeply embedded with our processes and how we have worked over the years, it causes both ends of that fulfillment center relationship to continue to operate and engage that way. Because to ask someone what is a business goal and what are the performance requirements to achieve that goal, that requires a little deeper thought, a little deeper explanation, much more consideration, and I dare say a little bit more time. It's real easy to say to someone, we need a leadership training. We got 500 people to train and we need it by the end of the month. That's an easy conversation to have. But when you start talking about what is a business goal, what's the context for that business goal? What's happening now that we either want to change or maintain? Oh, and by the way, if people are performing in a way that helps us move or maintain the needle, what does that look like? And what is it that has power and potential to be a threat to how people need to be performing? And if we're thinking about performance in ways in which we can monitor and measure it to determine the extent to which we're reaching the goal or not, what is the key performance indicator that we can use to do that? That is such a different conversation, David. So again, just I'm using some play with semantics here, but I think that, there's a little bit of responsibility, um, and guilt, not guilt, but, I guess what I'm saying is that, you know, L&D owns some of that, and then our business partners and our stakeholders own some of that as well.
I love what you said, Kevin. And what I would add is I think part of the issue is that a lot of organizations, they don't think about what evidence to bring in until the program's over. And I love the fact that as you've been explaining it, it starts with those metrics. It starts with the understanding. And instead of being a linear thing that we start and we end with, kind of becomes a circle that we just go back to where we started. What were those business outcomes? How did we go with affecting those? So I love that. And that's what builds that trust when we talk about the our work through the lens of the business. It builds that trust with the leaders. And that's what I want to talk about in our final segment. We want to talk about how learning leaders can start building evidence that executives actually trust when we tell our stories. So we'll dive into that when we come back after this.
You've got the knowledge, the expertise, but turning that into effective, engaging training, that's another skill entirely. At InSync Training, we take your content and transform it into learner-focused, interactive, and results-driven programs without the guesswork. Our instructional designers are experts in structuring training that's clear and engaging, designing interactive virtual, hybrid, and blended learning experiences, and developing training that sticks. So your employees don't just learn, they apply. Stop struggling with training that misses the mark. Let's design something that works. Schedule a consultation today.
Okay, for our last segment, I want to talk about how we move from just activity to actual evidence, how we build executive confidence in the work that we're doing. Kevin, when executives ask about learning impact, what kind of evidence actually resonates with them?
So I believe, David, that it takes a village to impact workplace performance. And so, where I've had a lot of success is creating evidence and insights that shows the contributions from the village and how those contributions from the village are ultimately moving or maintaining the needle for a business goal. And so, David, when I talk about the village and thinking about a business goal, what I know for certain and for sure is that training, learning, and talent development has never, ever move the needle or sustain the needle on its own, which means that there are other key players, other elements in the workplace performance ecosystem. And so some of those key players and elements might look like, what is the marketing team doing to contribute to the business goal? What is the technology team doing to contribute to the business goal? What is the products and research team doing to contribute to the business goal? What is the L&D team doing to contribute to the business goals? So the types of insights that I create and the types of impact reports that I create shows all of the elements, all of the contributions that are swirling around in this workplace performance ecosystem, all in ways that are working together to achieve whatever that business goal is. And so when I produce reports, when I produce insights, when I produce, again, impact reporting, the essence of what I am identifying is first and foremost, what is the key performance indicator that we're using to measure success? And then what are each one of those different elements in the workplace performance ecosystem contributing to that goal? Not just L&D by itself, not just marketing by itself, but again, it takes a village to impact workplace performance, which means that we have to gain insight into what the village is doing collectively. And when I create reports for senior leaders and executives and the C suite, what I am producing is a report that shows all the contributions of the ecosystem. And that is a much more realistic, much more fair, much more equitable way to identify and measure the impact of training and learning in combination with other contributors in the workplace performance ecosystem.
So you talked about the report that you would prepare for an executive. And we've got all these different inputs. We've got the village that's providing all of the input. We've got the metrics that we've identified. We've got the business outcomes that we want to be supporting. But what's the deliverable look like? What does an executive ready learning report actually look like?
That's a great question. And so the reporting that I use and how I tell the story begins with what was, or rather, what is the business goal? I follow that up with what is the context for the business goal? I then identify what are or what were the human performance requirements to help achieve that goal. I then identify what the challenges are, not only to human performance, but to achieving the business goal. So that's kind of like a backdrop or a backstory. I
Hmm.
then identify what each contributor in the workplace performance ecosystem is contributing. So, for example, that may mean that the marketing team is producing some type of collateral to help bring product awareness, right? That might also mean that the technology team is introducing a new platform that contributes to achieving the business goal. That might also mean that the recruiting and the HR team is bringing in new employees or a different level of talent or skill to help achieve that business goal. That may also mean that the L&D team is creating solutions and performance support to help achieve the business goal. So I'm identifying all of those elements, all of those contributors, and then showing the result. So as a result of all of those contributions, as a result of all of those elements coming together in the workplace performance ecosystem, here is what we were able to achieve. So I'm not isolating training and learning by itself, because you can't. You can't say that training and learning did something on its own, but you can say that in combination with other contributions and other elements, we were able to move or maintain the business goal.
So when we talk about all of this together, we talked earlier about legacy. And when I think about the legacy that holds us back, when I think about a word like legacy, I think legacy gives us habits.
Mm,
Legacy forms expectations that people have, both in terms of the learning professionals and the work that we do, and the people that are our stakeholders. There are habits that they have, and there are expectations that they have. So it's not just a switch that we can easily flick to make this change. How can learning leaders start moving from reporting activity to reporting on performance?
I love that you said that. And I believe that it's important for us to be empathetic to ourselves
Hmm.
and also be empathetic to our business partners and stakeholders, because what we're talking about today is change. And change is not always easy. It's a change in expectations, it's a change in mindset. Excuse me. It's a change in method. And so we first and foremost need to be patient, and we need to be empathetic with ourselves. So your question is, how do we start that change? Excuse me, David. So I believe that one of the ways in which the change starts is by showing examples of what's possible, because that then changes the discussion. So even if we begin to change by sharing with our business partners and our stakeholders what a different conversation looks like, that is rooted in performance versus rooted in, being order takers, that's one of the ways in which we can say, these are the questions we want to ask. Here's why we want to ask these types of questions. And here's the expected outcome that we believe we will get. So it's going to start first and foremost by having a different kind of conversation. Because if we don't change that conversation in the beginning, if we don't start having performance focused and performance based conversations at the forefront, we're going to continue this repetitive, vicious cycle of asking the question, why are we struggling with measurement? We got to do different, David. We got to have performance focused and performance based conversations. That's where it all starts.
So if it all starts there, it could still sound a little overwhelming if this is new for me. What's one small if I want to start proving impact, I want to start taking my journey down this path. What's my first step? What's one thing I could start doing tomorrow?
One thing I believe that you can start doing tomorrow, that we can start doing tomorrow, that our listeners and watchers can start doing tomorrow is asking one question. I was going to say one simple question. Maybe it is simple. I don't know. Here's a question to ask that we might not be asking now. What are the human performance requirements that will help us achieve the business goal? That's a powerful question. Is so much more different than what training do we need. So I would say, if there is no other question, let's say that, someone said to you, we're going to change the way we think about training and performance. And starting tomorrow, you have to start with one question. I would say that one question is what I just shared. The question is, what are the human performance requirements that are going to help people achieve the business goal? And in answering that question, David, it cannot sound like people need to know, people need to learn, people need to understand. Those cannot be answers, but rather we need to hear an articulation of real behaviors. We need to hear an articulation of what it looks like when people are working and engaging day to day in a way that will help them achieve whatever that business goal is. So I believe that if we can lead with that question and get the answer and not accept as answers, people need to know, people need to learn, people need to understand. If we don't accept those types of answers and we can get a real description, a real articulation of skills and behaviors, I think that we are in the best possible position to start doing something different as it relates to not only what we provide in terms of our solutions, but how we measure impact, because then we're going to be measuring impact based on performance outcomes and what it looks like when skills and behaviors are showing up real time, day to day on the job.
I think that is a great question for us to end our conversation on. It's a very practical question. It helps build that mindset that we were talking about earlier. So I think it's a great area for us to close our conversation. I could talk to you all day about impact. I love the energy you bring to it, and I love the contributions you make to our field to do that. So I thank you for joining us and sharing that. But before we close, I want to focus on one other area of impact that really stands out about your work. It's outside the work of L&D. You actually run a nonprofit called Meals in the Meantime. Can you tell me a little bit about that? What inspired you to start it, and what kind of work you're doing with it today?
Yes, and thank you for asking, David. So, in addition to L&D Detective work, which is measuring the impact of training, I am also making an impact with the nonprofit that I started and lead, Meals in the Meantime. I'm excited to report that this is our 5-year anniversary. We have a
Congrats.
big gala coming up in June of this year. We're going to be celebrating the work that we've done over the past 5 years, David. And our work is filling the food gap with nourishment and dignity. And so we do that with our mobile pop-up food pantries. We go into different communities with boots on the ground, volunteers, our food, and we're helping people who are experiencing food insecurity. We know that food insecurity is a condition, not a condemnation. And so Meals in the Meantime is here to change that condition. And so that is the work that I love. That is the work that I'm very passionate about, is the work that I enjoy. And to be quite candid, I believe that that's why I'm on this earth. I believe that I'm here to help people who need food. So thank you about asking who Meals in the Meantime is, who we are, and what we do.
And tell me, where, if people want to learn more, lend their support, where can they go to learn more?
Absolutely. You can certainly visit our website at mealsinthemeantime.org. I am very proud and happy to say that the global L&D community continues to show up for Meals in the Meantime with gifts and support. And so we invite and encourage the continuation of those gifts and that support. So check us out at mealsinthemeantime.org. And again, join us in our celebration of our 5-year anniversary.
Excellent. And congratulations on that anniversary. It's well deserved.
Thank you.
So, and then Meals in the Meantime, powerful reminder that impact isn't just something we talk about in our learning programs. It's something that we can truly create in the world. And to our listeners, if you'd like to explore whether your learning programs are truly driving performance, InSync has created a tool called the Live Learning Impact Diagnostic. It helps you identify where learning holds and where it breaks across design intent, delivery stability, and evidence leaders trust. You can learn more and apply the diagnostic to your programs at insynctraining.com. And if you're enjoying these conversations, be sure to subscribe to Modern Learning on the Air so you never miss an episode. Kevin, thanks for being our guest again here today.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Thank you. And thank you for listening. We'll see you again next time.
Thank you for tuning into Modern Learning on the Air. For all your training and services needs, visit us at insynctraining.com. And don't forget to sign up for our monthly webinars, where we cover key topics and trends in the learning and development space. Until next time, keep learning and keep growing.